things aren't always the way they seem. Sometimes at first glance, or when we first look at something, we first getting information about something, it seems pretty obvious. But then when we check into it more, it's not what we thought at all. Um, about 15 years ago, I was making one of my trips to Haiti, and I was flying out of International Falls, Minnesota. So I drove to International Falls, and I crossed the border into the United States at the border crossing between Fort Frances, Ontario, and International Falls, Minnesota. When I got to the U.S. side, the customs officer there at the window looked at my passport and um, asked me where I'm going. I told him I'm flying out of International Falls. I'm going to Haiti, and he was wondering, what are you bringing with you into the States? I said, well, I'm not bringing anything with me that's going to stay in the States. Everything I have is going to go with me to Haiti. He said, well, what do you have? And I said, well, I have my clothing. I have some gifts for people and things. And so he was like, okay. Well, I said, maybe just pull over here and we'll just take a look. I said, okay. So I pulled over to the side and went inside, and they sent a lady officer out to look at my things. And then she came back in and she said, I need help. Like, those suitcases are heavy. And it was still at the time when you could put 70 pounds in a suitcase. And I had them loaded with as much stuff as I could take. And so a male officer went out and helped her. And then pretty soon he came back in and he said, can you explain the clothing in your suitcase? And I said, yeah, I can. It's clothing that I'm taking to give to someone. He said, yeah, but it's women's and children's clothing. I said, I know. I have friends down there that are women and children, and so I'm taking clothing down for them. He said, yeah, but it's used clothing. I said, I know it's used clothing, but when you don't have a lot of clothing, used clothing is fine. It's good. They'll be glad for it. I was like, okay. So then he went out, and then pretty soon he came back in and he said, so where are you staying when you go to Haiti? What hotel are you staying in? I said, I'm not staying in a hotel. I'm going to stay with friends in their houses, and I go there and I know people. I have friends, and I'll just stay with one of my friends in their house. And well, where are you going to get your food? I said, well, I'll be eating with my friends. I said, okay. So I went back out. After a while, he came back in and he said, can you explain the amplifier and the microphones in your suitcase? I said, yeah, the church there, their sound system went bad, and they asked me to bring them another sound system. So I'm taking down some microphones and a sound system for them, and so that's why I have that in my suitcase. I was like, okay. Went back out, and he came in with a bag that had my money in, and I had a bunch of Haitian money left from when I had been in Haiti 6 months before that. I had money left over, and I brought it back with me, and then I was taking it back down. Plus, I had some U.S. money that I was taking down to give to people. Well, the exchange rate at the time was like 50 gourds to a dollar. So the numbers on the Haitian bills were large. They looked like large bills, but in fact, the value in U.S. dollars wasn't very high. But he thought that I was crossing the border with more than $10,000. And if you cross the border with more than $10,000 and don't declare it, that's not allowed. And so you can be arrested for that. So immediately he thought I was going to be arrested for having more than $10,000 in cash crossing the border. And when people cross the border with large amounts of cash, they usually think, well, there's a drug deal or something going on. So he said, whose money is this? I said, it's mine. He said, what are you going to do with this money? I said, I'm going to give it away. And he said, do you give this much money away often? I said, if I can, I do. So he said, well, how much other money do you have on you? I said, I'm not sure. He said, okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to take everything out of your pockets and lay it here on the counter. So I took everything out of my pockets and laid it on the counter, and he started going through my wallet and everything that I had in my pockets, and I didn't have a lot of money in my wallet, but he took that out, counted that, and then he was going through whatever else I had in my pocket. And in my shirt pocket, I had some papers, and we had been in Vietnam a month or two before that, and in my shirt pocket, I had a business card from the hotel that we had stayed in Ho Chi Minh City. And when he found that business card, he was like, Vietnam. You were in Vietnam. Yeah, I was in Vietnam. What were you doing in Vietnam? So I explained to him what I was doing, had been doing in Vietnam, and he was like, "Who do you know in Vietnam?" I said, I only know one person in Vietnam. I have one high school friend that works in Vietnam as a headmaster at a school, but I don't know anyone else in Vietnam. That's it." And well, what connections do you have to Vietnam? I don't have any connections to Vietnam. He said, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to back up and stand back against the wall. And so I was like, okay. And I realized this is getting really serious. Like, I'm in trouble here. And I was nervous. And plus, I was starting to think my flight is getting closer and closer to my flight time. And if I don't soon get out of here, I'm going to miss my flight. And but they weren't worried about my flight. They didn't think I was going anywhere. They thought I was going to jail for bringing in more than $10,000. They were thinking they were going to arrest me soon. But when I backed up against the wall, because I was nervous, I put my hands in my pockets, and he said, "No, no, don't put your hands in your pockets. You can't be doing that. You got to keep your hands out where we can see them. This is just for everyone's safety. Please keep your hands out where we can see them." And I was like, "Okay, okay, I'm sorry." And I got my hands out where they could see them, and and they're getting. I realized this is really serious, and so. Then the lady officer, she had been back on the computer, and she was checking the value of the money I had. And then after a few minutes, she said, well, Haitian money is only worth $200. So it's not, yeah, he's fine. Everything's okay. So then they said, okay, well, okay, you can take your stuff, you can go. And so everything was defused, and I made my flight. But things had started to escalate. And the more things they saw in my suitcase that didn't make sense, the more they thought I was going. And then when they found my money, they were sure I was going to be arrested. But it didn't turn out the way they thought. Things weren't the way it looked to them. And eventually, everything was okay, and my trip to Haiti was fine.